name is Alexa Morales. I am an admission counselor at Providence College, currently in Boston. So very excited, like I mentioned, and I will hand it over to Katie.
Good evening, everyone. My name is technically Catherine Burdick. You can all call me Katie. I am a senior admission counselor in our office. I also went to Providence College for undergraduate. So happy to answer questions about student life too at the very end. But we're very excited to have you all join us tonight. You'll see down below that we do have a Q&A box, so feel free to drop questions in there throughout our time speaking with all of you. This is really to help all of you prepare to submit that Common App in a few short weeks. So feel free to keep adding questions there, and we will begin to address those at the end of our presentation.
Perfect. So with that being said, we will get started. Again, if you have questions, just feel free to throw those in the chat. Okay, so how to craft a successful application. And we are going to start off with, I'm a little frozen, connecting with your admission counselor.
Yeah, so this is a great place to start your college application process. I think sometimes it can be a little daunting opening up that Common App, seeing all of those questions you have to answer, keeping track of deadlines, all of those questions that come up while you build your college lists. And so we at Providence really like to emphasize that we're here to support you throughout that process. Alexa mentioned she's currently in Boston. I'm currently in Pennsylvania, and we are traveling, visiting students at their high schools, talking to all of you at college fairs, and really building those connections. And we want those relationships to foster even beyond when we meet you in person or you come onto campus for a campus tour or information session. So I really encourage all of you at the end of tonight to go onto our website. You can see the Contact Your Admissions Counselor page, and you can type in your high school. That's just how we divide up counselors in our office. And our little picture will pop up with our email address, and that can just be a great resource to have in your back pocket as you go over these next few months. Many of us have our own experiences at Providence, even for those that didn't graduate from there. They've gotten to know our community super, super well. And so if you have a specific question about a major or a club or organization, we're happy to direct you in the right direction and kind of help you make those connections to really feel confident about your college list. And again, answer those questions that come up. I promise you all, there are no dumb questions. Everything is totally valid to ask us, and we're always happy to answer those via email. I also will say that it can just be nice to put that face to an application sometimes if we've heard from you. Now, don't take this to the extreme. We don't need a weekly check-in or anything. But if you just have a quick time to introduce yourself, maybe share a little about yourself through email, that can just be a nice way to add something to your application. Again, not required, but just can be helpful to start to build that relationship. That's a huge piece of the college application process at Providence. We want to be able to advocate for all of you through this process. And so getting to know that counselor can be a helpful first step as you start to craft your application.
I completely agree. And we love your parents, we love your counselors, but most of all, we love you all as students. So don't feel intimidated to reach out to us. Definitely just take your time with that, but reach out once you're comfortable with us, just because we want to build that relationship with you rather than your parent or your counselor. So just keep that in mind as well. But with that being said, I will move us on to the next tip. Which is a fit to major. So when we are reading your application, this is something that we are looking for. Some of you might know exactly what you want to major in, and maybe you have known for a while. So that made it a little bit easier for you to potentially tailor your high school years so that maybe you're doing some meaningful things that really do fit into what you want to major in. And for us as admission counselors, that just makes it really helpful because at the end of the day, we're really looking for the best academic and personal fits to our campus. And how we end up doing that is truly by getting a good read of who you are as a person from your application and really picturing how you would be a fit here on our campus, which is really important. This is done by us definitely looking over your activities, which we will talk about a little bit later on, and what you do outside of the classroom. But it's also done by looking at your transcript, the types of classes that you're taking. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through your application process. An example of this would be if you're thinking about applying to Providence as a biology major, for example, then I think it makes sense for you to take a few more courses focused in the science curriculum from your school. Another example of this would maybe focusing on taking pre-calc or maybe even stats if you're thinking about coming in as a finance major into our business school. Those courses on your transcript are kind of the academic pieces that we can see, and we can see a fit to a specific major. But at the same time, we also understand that some of you might not know what you want to do yet, and that's also completely fine. I know I just mentioned all of those pieces fitting in together, but again, you can absolutely apply as undecided or undeclared. Some of you might be thinking about a specific major also, but you might not even be 100% sure that you want to stick with it once you arrive to campus, and that's also okay. In those instances, it might just help us if you explain what your academic interest might be. And I just want to lay it out that we understand that you are only 17 or 18-year-olds, and you have a lot of time to figure out what you want to do, whether that is the perfect major for you, the perfect program, or even the perfect career for you. So we're not going to penalize you for not showing us a fit to major, but it will help us understand why you would be a fit to our campus as a whole. So just keep that in mind. We truly don't expect you all to know exactly what you want to do, but just helping us kind of get the context behind what you want to do is going to be really helpful. So if you don't have a fit to major, but you've chosen a major, maybe even taking some space within your application and just explaining that to us, just so that we can really understand and see the full picture of you as a student. Do you have anything to add on, Katie?
No, I think that's all really important. I think it can be hard again to decide that major. And for everything that we're mentioning tonight, these are all just our recommendations. Like, don't feel like you have to keep a list of everything we say and check it off as you go through your application. We're just trying to give you some tips that you maybe have not thought of before. So it's definitely true for those science students. For a lot of our business majors, some of your high schools offer those business electives. That can be nice to see that you've gotten a little introduction to finance or marketing. We're just trying to give you some ideas of how to, again, make the most successful and feel the best about submitting that application. Now, I think this is my favorite tip, and for anyone that has met me at a college fair or on campus, this is something that I really feel strongly as a great way to kind of add a little bit to your application for any of those schools that you're really excited about. Providence does offer an optional supplemental essay, and I know I said the word optional, but I strongly recommend all of you consider writing this. It just helps us as counselors get to know you in a different way that we may not see through other parts of your application. So we have a very holistic review of our applications at Providence. Alexa and I and the rest of our staff literally spend months looking through all of your activities, your Common App essay, your academics. And we do learn a lot about you all from all that information you're providing on the Common App. But the supplement is just a way to maybe show a different side of who you are, add an additional piece to that puzzle. So at Providence, we currently have 2 different prompts that you can choose from. They are available on our website and on the Common App, and you only have to choose one of them. And it's really just an additional space to share more about who you are. This is really where you get to maybe make it personalized to Providence a little bit. This is an essay that only we are seeing. And so if you want to talk about some of the great parts of our campus, maybe you saw on tour, or maybe you've researched on our website, this is a nice space to do that. Still make it authentic to who you are. That's all about the Common Application in total, is getting to know who each of you are. But definitely think about some ways that maybe you can add a little to this supplemental essay. Again, it's technically optional, but just an additional piece to help us learn something about you. New this year, for any of our students interested in nursing, we're offering an optional nursing supplement as well. That will be available on your Providence College admission portal once that opens up in a few weeks. So more information to come about that. You can also read about that on our website. But for those students that are interested in nursing, that might also be a helpful piece to kind of consider as you're building your application. These writing samples, of course, show us how great of a writer you are, but also help us just think of different ways to advocate for you throughout this admissions process.
Absolutely. Yeah, the supplemental is definitely just another piece of your puzzle, just showing us why you would be a fit on our campus. So definitely take the opportunity to do that if you would like to, just because it's going to give us a little bit more background information on you, just like Katie had mentioned. But next, I do want to cover the additional information section. This isn't something that is required of students. It's more of an option for you to have just a space to tell a school something about maybe something that you didn't necessarily have space for in the application that you think we should know about you. There are many uses for this space in the Common App. It's more informal than your essay also, or the optional supplemental piece. So just think about that as well. Again, this is an optional piece as well. It's not something that you necessarily have to fill out. It's kind of just giving us more context behind something that has happened. I have seen it used to provide context for a dip in grades, explain a schedule conflict. An example of this is maybe having to choose between AP Bio and AP Spanish your senior year, and maybe you chose AP Bio because you were interested in nursing, for example. It can also be used to explain any discrepancies in your application, like maybe changing schools multiple times, which happens to a lot of students. And sometimes they don't take the time to kind of explain that to us. So we get a little confused why they're switching schools. So this would be a space where you can definitely utilize that. It's truly a space to provide context or an explanation to your counselor about pieces of your story that might not fit somewhere else in your application. So just keep that in mind. Some other examples of this could be telling us about a serious illness or maybe a family hardship or even a learning disability. I've seen that a lot on students' applications, which is really helpful for us on our end also, because then it gets our gears rolling and we're thinking about different resources that we will need to have on campus for these students as well. Any additional context that you can give us about your high school experience can really help us picture you as a successful student here on our campus. But I also want to make it clear that if you have a circumstance that you might want to highlight in your essay, you don't have to write about it here as well for a second time. So just keep that in mind. But on the other side of things, if you don't have any additional information that you want to or need to provide, that's completely fine. Again, you're not going to be penalized for not submitting anything in this portion. It's just an option for you to give us more context. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I think that's all very important. Again, don't feel like you have to totally explain your block schedule or I had math at 8:30 every morning. We don't need to know that much. But it is helpful to kind of have that space available to you if you want to further explain anything. That's also the space to contact your admissions counselor. So feel free to write that in an email too. All of our emails for the most part, get linked to the application in some way just for us to keep track of any important information students share with us. So that just kind of helps to keep us all organized. If maybe you share something over email with us, we want to be able to share that with our colleagues when we're reviewing your application. So that's really where that comes into play.
Absolutely.
The final tip we're going to cover, and again, keep sending in questions. We have plenty of time for all of your great questions about the application process, is to just kind of utilize this activities list. I think a lot of counselors call this like the brag sheet, and it really is a space for you to share about all of your great things you've done during your time in high school. You really are kind of highlighting all of those experiences you've had outside of the typical doing your homework, going to class, all those different pieces. So I think students kind of think of those stereotypical activities a little bit off the top of their head and definitely include those athletic opportunities. Any service opportunities can definitely go on this list too. But also think about maybe some other activities that you're doing that are taking up your time outside of high school, maybe even if they're not totally connected to your high school. So that can be anything you do with your church or your home parish. Feel free to include that in your activities list. Maybe you have younger siblings that you babysit for, and that takes up a lot of your time. I'm one of five. I totally get it. And so it really is that space to help us learn something about you. And again, put all those different puzzle pieces together. For the 10 boxes, I think sometimes students are like, okay, I need to come up with 10 perfect, amazing things, and that's the way I'll present the best application to all of you. But don't feel like you just have to fill space to fill space. If you have played on a soccer team for your whole life, you don't have to put like soccer year one, soccer year two, soccer year three, varsity soccer senior year. You can put that all together and really use that little description space. I know it's small, I know it's not a lot of characters, to just provide us some more context about that. If you have a leadership role in any of these activities, that's where you can share that. If one of your clubs or organizations at your high school did something really cool with fundraising or started a new event, that's where you can share that information. Don't feel like you have to explain like what being on the football team means. We have a pretty good understanding of that. But if you do have any activities that maybe use an acronym or a little bit more specific to your high school or hometown, feel free to use that space to spell it out for us. Again, we're trying to learn as much as possible about you through this application. That's really my biggest tip with the college application process as a whole, is just help us learn about you as you pick your essay topics and your letters of recommendation and fill out this activities list. You're putting all those different puzzle pieces together, which I know sounds a little bit daunting of like, how do I sum up 17 years of my life in a Common App? But that's really where you can use these spaces that Alexa and I have mentioned to dive a little bit deeper into that. So the activities is always a fun piece for me to read through. Our students are very involved at Providence. They're playing intramural sports, they're joining lots of clubs and activities. Our student congress is super, super popular. Our tour guides are popular. And so we kind of see that fit to you being in our community by looking at your activities. So feel free to use that space on the Common App to elaborate a little bit more about what those activities have meant to you throughout your time in high school. Anything I've missed so far, Alexa?
No, you are doing amazing. I honestly don't think I would add anything to that except, like you mentioned, everyone make sure you're giving us context because again, just to elaborate on this a little bit more, we cannot research every single school and look up what your clubs mean. An example of this is I had a student that was in jam club and I instantly thought, oh, maybe they are like in a club where they play instruments, but it was a club where they actually tried different jams and jellies and peanut butters. So I would have never known that unless they wrote that in there. So just try to put yourself in our shoes for a minute, especially when you're filling out that activities list, just so that we can understand because we are reading from a bunch of different schools. And then also, for the most part, when you are a senior, sometimes your counselor will give you something called a brag sheet. And this just kind of helps them out when they're writing their letters of recommendation. I definitely recommend taking a copy of that and using that as your guide when you're filling out your activities list, because it can be daunting, like Katie mentioned, to kind of fill out every single box and try to think back of every single activity that you've done in that moment. So if you have that sheet and just use it as an outline, it's going to make the process of putting those activities in so much smoother.
Awesome. I think we can move on to questions. I have them up on the side, so I can read them out and Alexa will just take turns kind of going through them. So the first question, we kind of touched on this, was if you email questions, is that kept track of?
Yes. So once you are emailing different questions to us, we will add it to your file. And once we do start looking over your application, there's a little tab and we'll be able to see every interaction that we've had with you. But we don't track demonstrated interest, but it is still nice to know that you were interacting with us.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line of, again, we don't need to see, they sent me a weekly email just to see how my day was going. I appreciate your kind and caring thoughts, but it really is that space to ask those questions if you have them, and just kind of keep in touch that way. The next question is, if I don't have anything specifically tied to my major, will it affect me negatively? So we kind of touched on this a little bit, and Alexa and I really wanted to highlight that if you have those specific examples to share with us, we're happy to read through them. but don't feel pressured at the age of 17 or 18 to have this super full resume. It really is up to you as a student what you've done with your time there. Maybe you've dedicated a lot of time to other things, or maybe you have a major that doesn't have a lot of opportunities while you're in high school to start to get involved with. So we're not expecting anything from our students that apply, but we just wanted to encourage you, if you have those things to share, to feel free to share them with us.
Mhm.
The next question is, what is an ideal GPA and SAT when applying?
That's a great question. Honestly, it really depends on the student. Like Katie mentioned earlier, we're taking a holistic approach when we're looking at your applications. So you can come in with any GPA, and we're going to see how much of a fit you are to your program, your major, the school itself. And again, it also depends on the way you're coming in. So early action, early decision, and regular decision are also very different. I recommend reaching out to your counselor or just sitting down with your school counselor in your high school and kind of discussing which way might be the best path for you, and the differences between them based off of your SAT score and your GPA. We are also test optional, so you can keep that in mind. We have a little over 60% of our students that had come in and they actually did not submit test scores. So you can just keep that in mind. That's a little context behind that as well. If you're not comfortable or confident in your score, don't send it in. We're not going to penalize you for it.
Yeah, I typically say, like, if you are really proud and excited and you feel like your ACT or SAT scores reflect the work you've done in high school, then feel free to submit them. But we never make any kind of judgments or assumptions just because a student doesn't send them in. So the next question is, if you apply undecided, can you switch to any major you want, or are there restrictions?
The only restriction there is with nursing. Nursing is a direct entry program. So for any nursing majors out there, it's very important that you know that you have to apply directly into nursing. You cannot transfer in. And it just goes back to our nursing program being so rigorous, but also being so new. We're only in our second year of nursing. So just keep that in mind when you're applying. If you have any questions about the nursing program specifically, feel free to reach out to us and we can definitely get those questions answered. But for the most part, in undeclared, you will be working with an academic advisor, and they will help you with the entire process of figuring out what type of major is going to be the best fit for you, and then helping you declare that major as well.
Yeah, for a majority of our programs, you have until the end of your sophomore year to declare any major, or if you want a double major, that's definitely an option for you. And there really is a lot of flexibility there. It's all about developing that relationship with your academic advisor. The next question is, if my grades are not the best, should I wait for regular decision and get my GPA up or do early action? So I would say, really, this is an opportunity for you to talk with your counselor that works with students from your high school, and kind of talk through that different decision. So we do offer both early action and regular decision, and it's really up to a student's preferences. We don't fill our whole class with early action students. We have plenty of space for those students that may want to take a little bit of extra time to fill out that application. For early action, we typically just see your senior schedule. And so we don't necessarily always have a checkpoint of how are you doing now. We've seen what classes you've decided to take, and we may have first quarter grades, but not always. Regular decision, we do typically see that first semester grades from senior year. So if you're really on the up and up, you feel really proud about how you're doing in all of these great rigorous classes, that might be a better opportunity for you. So I don't want to make any broad decisions for you just on this webinar. I really encourage you to kind of talk to your counselor and reach out to them. All right. The next question is, are these things on the specific Providence application, not the Common App?
So our application is through the Common App. For the most part, you're going to find the majority of everything that we talked about in the Common App itself, besides the supplemental essay, and sometimes the actual essay as well, because it is kind of finicky based off whether some schools make it optional and some schools don't. For us, it is mandatory to submit an essay, but it is optional to submit that supplemental. So those parts will be the supplemental will be in the PC portion, but the essay will be in the actual Common App. if that makes sense.
Yeah, so everything you have to submit to us is on the Common App. There's no separate website or anything. The next question is, how competitive is the nursing program? Also, if I'm not admitted into the nursing program, could I still be considered into Providence College?
So when it comes to the nursing program, we are a bit selective. The selectivity rate is around 32 to 33%. And it really just depends when you're coming in. But for the most part, when it comes to nursing itself, like I mentioned, it's direct entry, so you have to apply directly into it. If you are not accepted into nursing, unfortunately, you won't be accepted into Providence College as a whole. Our numbers are growing, like I said, but when it comes to applying to Providence as a nursing major, you're applying directly into it. So you can't be accepted to Providence and just denied from the nursing school. You would have to reapply in the next year.
The next question is, if we did community service consistently, can we include that on our activities list? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep. So whatever that may be, if you are running out of the 10 spaces and just need to put it all together in community service, that's where you can use that description to maybe include working at a soup kitchen or volunteering at CCG classes. That's really where you can use that space to expand it. All right. Do you have any tips for ordering our activities list?
The only thing I would suggest is there's two different ways you could do it. You could put it in chronological order if you'd like, but I would say backwards chronological order, starting with your senior year and going down to freshman year, or you could just categorize it by what is most important to you, but it's really personal preference.
Yeah, we read through all of them, so we'll get to all of them no matter what. Feel free to use whatever style best fits you. I've gotten a couple of questions about things that you did in middle school, whether it be awards that you've gotten or any activities you did in middle school. Should those be included on the Common App?
I think just focus more on the last 4 years, so from freshman year to your current senior year, just because it reflects more of how you are as a person now, because every student is growing and changing through the years. If something is super important to you and you have continued it from middle school up until now, you can include that when it asks for the dates or the timeline. But honestly, I would just focus on freshman to senior year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If there's something that you've been doing since you were a little kid, we're not going to tell you to totally forget about that piece. But if you have those very specific, like awards from 8th grade or 7th grade, I would say more so focus on some of your more recent accolades.